Hey, and welcome to LEAP, the League of Emergent Architectural Practitioners. I'm your host, Stephen Corliss, founder, owner of Corliss Architecture. If you've been following along, this channel is starting to take a look at the behind-the-scenes, full transparency workflows and processes of architectural documentation for design, construction documents, construction administration, all the good stuff that comes with running a practice and being an architect. And so this week we've been looking at a new construction home design that'll be located in Bellwood, Illinois, just west of Chicago. And it's a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath new construction home built for the city. And we have a set of goals here for the structure and the programming that we are going to put into practice now. So if you've been following along, like I mentioned, we have already gone over the site plan, and I'll pull it up on the screen here, just to get the setbacks, the front yard, side yard, rear yard setbacks. We've got a detached garage in this one, 2-car garage. Like I mentioned, 4-bed, 2.5 bath. We're going to have laundry. Second floor is going to host all utilities. And the objective here is to make a very, we'll say, a modern yet a traditional valued home. Very cost effective because we're aiming for the missing middle to provide housing. But we don't want to build something that's so modern and so trendy that it's going to fall out of fashion and not retain its value. So I know that can be sort of a faux pas in terms of architectural design concepts, but when you're building homes like this or designing homes like this, it's critical that you're actually thinking about these things early on in terms of cost effectiveness for the strategy of the home. And I can get into a lot deeper where I think the state of the profession is in terms of being too guided by flashy images and designs, especially with the use of AI, but that's for another time. Unless you're tuned in and want to talk about it, feel free to drop a line in the chat. But without further ado, let's dive in. I want to show you guys where I left off. And before I do that, let me just confirm everything's rolling here. So we left off, and I'll share my screen because I made a little bit of progress in terms of the design. So let me make sure this is showing. Yeah. This is basically where we left off. We had extruded some walls, put a roof on, determined the floor levels, and started to talk about programming and laying out the space. And what we started to come up with was, I had mentioned I was interested in giving some significant dimensionality to this house from the street side, so the curb appeal would have not just a flat front. And this is how it started to look. I advanced it a little bit just using some AI programs to get a quick rendering. And it was looking nice. I then took it a step further and added some more of the material palette I was looking to steer this towards. And with some context, I know it actually looks a little bit out of context here. It just plugged in a Chicago-style bungalow, just stamp, stamp, stamp over and over. That's not really what the context looks like, but I was just trying to get an understanding of how this home would look with some context around it. And I felt like it was starting to look nice. Definitely modern, definitely simple, definitely sculptural. And though I think with those moves, we might be in a good position to propose something that has some longevity to it in terms of design standards. Not so much that it's a typology of modern design that would go out of fashion, but something that just has good design. And let me pull up an elevation here, just so I can sort of remember where I was at. Go to the elevation. Okay, so yeah, from where I was, and we just spit this out and then started kind of adding some windows and more details in the AI program. But I liked the lighting that was coming up. I asked it to place some up and down light, tubular, cylinder lights across the facade. I asked it to mimic the window on the right hand side to double that one up. And for our previous episode, I do want to put the primary bedroom on the top floor towards the front of the house, just because I think we're going to have more space to put that there given the hallway situation. So like I mentioned before, there's a lot of parts and pieces that are moving throughout this design process. So that's why, if you're not an architect and you're tuning in, or if you are an architect and you're just sort of learning your own design process, designers work in a lot of different ways. I tend to attack everything simultaneously and bring it up at the same time so that I'm not going down one certain path too far and end up needing to change it so much later on because we didn't consider a setback or some other programming that needed to be fit in. So that's sort of a long introduction and way of saying, let's get into the design here. So I'm going to pull up my programming list. And we left off looking at the ground floor here. This is a ground plane that I added in. I'm just going to sort of be working throughout, so I'll try and key in moments of the design process if you're watching this post-production. But if you're watching this live, feel free to chime in and ask questions. Otherwise, I might go silent for bits at a time. I'll try and narrate it as much as I can, just so I'm sharing my thought design process. So I was going to put this on site groundwork, so that's hidden. I've got this pad with the thickened slab edge. So we're going to walk in. I've got a coat closet here, which I'm not sure why that moved out. I'll just confirm that this is 3 feet. It moved out because I changed this wall from a masonry wall to a siding wall. Okay, so that makes perfect sense. So it's got the same stud thickness, but it doesn't have the masonry depth. It would just have the thickness of the sheathing and whatever cladding is going to go on top of that. So I've got a 1/2 inch for the sheathing and a 1/2 inch for the cladding. It's usually 3/8 of an inch, something around that, but it's close enough. So let me justify this. Revit's pretty goofy with how it integrates walls sometimes. Like I was trying to connect this so it just looks smooth, and then it wasn't. So if I do that again, try and disallow join, put it at that corner. Allow join. And it was just overriding it, and that has to do with this wall only coming up to the bottom of the first floor while these exterior walls are going full height. And we did talk a little bit about just the modeling. That's sort of a personal decision. For my purposes, it's just looks better, and for rendering purposes and everything, elevations, it's easier to not have that like line coming across from 2 separated exterior walls as they climb up the building. For larger projects, it may make sense, but for smaller projects like this, it's really you can get away with this, and I can already show you the section that we're working on. Go to section, the full building section here. Pull these over to the far side so it's matching up with the height. So I'll actually take this in. Clean up these tags a little bit. So like I said, the goal at the end of today is to have floor plan layouts. I might cut this session into kind of 2 chapters so that after I'm done with the floor plans and cleaning up the elevations, I do want to jump into some more visualization presentation material, so renderings and even a video, and that's sort of a much different process in terms of getting all that information ready. So think I'll probably take a pause and then restart it. So if you're curious why there's 2 stairs, last time I was just trying to see how much a stair that takes us from first floor to second floor, how much room that would take up. One of the configurations that I didn't put on there yet, but I thought of this morning, was doing an L configuration in case that works around like a downstairs closet or something. But again, something to think about in, you know, the smaller homes like this. This is going to be compressed down. I think I've got it at 55 feet, but I know I want to revise that to closer to 45, so we're probably going to chop about 10 feet off or so. So something to think about, like I was mentioning, is the space that some of these features take up. So a landing like this is technically considered wasted space if it's not working with the layout. It could be saving space if the layout is such that, you know, this tucks into a corner somewhere that would be wasted with a different type of layout. But generally, straight run stair is going to be less expensive to construct, less materials, take up less space, and so I think because it's a modern home, modern designed home, I think the straight run stair could have a nice aesthetic if we had sort of an open side to it, but we'll see how that works out. Okay, so we fixed that wall. We're coming in here. It would make the most sense to have what we'll say is a living room in this area. But before I do that, let's jump back into our section. There was something I was thinking about earlier today. These levels. So grade, I want to say, is actually at 0. So I'm going to have to shift all of this down. If grade is acting as our 0, and so if that's the case, I want to copy this new level down, and we'll change the elevation to 0. So if grade is 0, 0, we're actually going to raise it up. I know actually there was a way to reset this somehow. I'm forgetting. I'll have to dig into that and do that later, but I'm just going to leave that there as a benchmark. As a reminder to myself, I'll deal with that. But then something on top of that was the flooring. I know if we don't set this down 3/4 of an inch, I was thinking how that detail was going to work out. Which would matter more if we had traditional 8-foot ceilings, less if we raise it up a foot, which I think I wanted to do anyways, so we might just do that and then just call this level. It's going to be a lot easier for them to just pour that level. So if we're doing that, I do want to make sure that we're kind of setting this properly. I'm going to copy, paste, align to same place, and then change it to 3/4 inch white oak. That's how it would sit if we were there. And then taking this, lowering it, this would actually be raised. And if that's raised, it's going to affect, you know, all of our dimensions for floor to floor and things like that. So I'm just wondering now if it does make more sense to draw up this detail with a lowered slab. No, probably not. Okay, so we're going to leave it as is there, and we're going to have this actually coming up. And we'll have to actually put, I'm just going to call this finished floor. Level 1 finished floor. This is actually going to be top of slab. Grade, we had 6 inches down below from that, and then like I mentioned, I want to change all these levels, so again, very critical to get all these things set up early on. And usually I have most of these like built into my template so that you don't have to rethink about it each time. Got someone chiming in the chat. Felix, thanks for tuning in. So now we actually have a true like finished floor. So all the items that we're going to be placing on top of that, furniture, finishes, cabinetry, is going to be calculated to the top of that finished floor. And it's not actually going to go under there like that. I can edit the boundary in our floor plan. All these things get pretty goofy because like this is actually going to come under the drywall, and I know we can adjust all these things in the wall type, but you always have to just weigh like how much time it takes to do all of that effort, or just change it in one detail. Got a lot of project managers throughout my architectural career who claim to be frustrated by the graphic quality and thought Revit produced terrible drawings, but it really came down to the users. So I've got a full floor plane in here. I offset it 1 inch from where it was to be just under the drywall. Which means I'll have to rebuild these stairs, which is fine. I don't really need these here. I said I wanted to pursue a straight run stair. I do want that just in the model, so I have it to remember. So I'm going to do top of level 1 finished floor up to level 2. It's going to change that ever so slightly. It is what it is. It's still 15 risers. Got our straight run stair. Just want to double check. I saw that this was 3.5. That's not true. This just needs to be a hard 3 because treads come in, 36 or 42 or 48 dimensions typically, like prefabricated oak treads, things like that. So you got to keep these things relatively true to their real world built construction. types. Okay. So now that I got my floor plan, I'm just going to start throwing the walls down. There's really no better way to do it. I know we can start drafting by hand, but like I mentioned at the beginning of this series, this is something that needs to move along. So top constraint, ceiling level 1. So we're all set up to just start laying some walls down. And there are some like natural wall locations that you can see that would occur here, or actually like where we would actually need them. And something also to keep in mind, we've got to the 5.5 inch, the 2x6 perimeter stud wall for a load-bearing wall in the middle. It's not required, but if you're just looking to continue that wall and the center line for that wall, you can propose that it should be the 2x6, which we'll do. And line up the face of that with the face of this, so they can just build this continuously across. I'm getting that same issue there. Disallow join, just bring it to the face. Okay. And I think, like I mentioned about the stair, this is something, if we did come up to the second floor, it would be nice on the landing to have some of the items. Well, let's see how that works out. I don't want to talk before we get up there. But before we move along any further, I am going to pull this wall in another 10 feet. I was hoping everything was going to come with it, but let's see if it comes like this. No, not even those. Okay, gotta do these all individually. It's tricky. You can either, align it and then lock it, but when you do that, it can over-constrain it. Let's just try doing it for now, so in case it does come up later, let's squeeze this down even more. It may follow suit. 10 feet in, so now we've got an overall depth of 45 feet, which is much closer to the specs that the developer wanted. Out to out, and side to side, they were at 30, we're at 28, but I noticed an error that they had on the fire separation, so we're going to keep that. Okay, so moving along here, formal sitting rooms, they're gaining popularity again, actually, just to have a kind of third space within your own home. But when you're thinking about the sequence of coming into a home, the most natural thing to engage first is formal sitting area and then a casual sitting area. Seeing the kitchen was not a thing of the past. It was very back of house, and then more recently has become, a more common space for public activities within the home. But I'm trying to envision a more modern home for some of the clients we've been doing recently that tries to prioritize public versus private again. And the kitchen and the dining room have been combined in a lot of cases. For this, I would actually propose to remove the kitchen island. I know that's kind of not common by today's standards, but I would give them the option to do an island. And you don't really need two sitting areas. It seems like, the formality of dining, at least with a family, extended family, or friend group, they can be invited into like your primary dining area that you use every day. Now, it seems like that level of casualness has been achieved. So it's just a long way of kind of talking through some of these things that I'm looking at here. I do know that I'm going to want some level of privacy in the back, but not so much that it's eliminating the view of the kitchen. So let's sort of maybe zone this house front to back first, just with this load-bearing wall, and see if it makes sense for the stair to either start here and lead up towards the back. I did have a precedent that I do want to pull up again just to make reference to, so I'm pulling it up off screen here for a second. This one's from 2024 deliverables. And while I'm here, I'm going to open up a couple other things. Okay. Last but not least, we do have a set of preliminary consultants. I called it Legacy. Legacy. I don't know what that was. Okay, I'll share my screen again for what I'm looking at here. Similar kind of designed home, and I like this as a precedent just for sort of its efficiency. And I guess looking at this now, we kind of did a similar thing in terms of dividing it from one side from the next. I think I've got a little more space horizontally. We were at 24, this new one is 28, so we've got 4 more feet, which is going to help with some of this space here. And then again, I wasn't exactly sure if I want the load-bearing wall to be perfectly centered, which now it is in this new home that we have. But the stair location was in the back. Sort of had a greeting closet, foyer area here. I didn't like this because it was pulling sort of this dining nook very far away from this kitchen area. It had an office separated out in this space. But overall, it was, on the second floor especially, a very efficient floor plan. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think we can emulate something similar to that. I'm trying to remember if I had some interior renderings. I do. I mean, I do like this pairing, so I think we're gonna start out with that pairing with the living room tied vertically into the kitchen area here. So I'm actually, what I'm going to do is always save. Start placing down some kitchen elements first. Just wondering if it makes sense. I'm just going to open up one of my previous files. This was a more recent one that I have. And I just know that all the parts and pieces I have in here are kind of current. So, like I said, the option for the island, I mean, we might just start with it. It might be something I propose to them, but I'm going to copy this element and just throw it into our new plan here. See how much space it actually takes up. Paste. Align to selected floors. So now I'm actually realizing this floor plan is not aligned with our actual floor. Level 1 finished floor. Okay. Uncrop. Brought this way in over here. So I can already see if having an island like this large, it's way too big for a space like this. We'll need at least another 5 feet from the edge of that, and then some walking space there. So that's why I think lining up this wall is going to be a bit troublesome unless we create an opening, which maybe could work actually. Let's go back. Restore all excluded. Didn't even know that was a thing. Yeah, it's making me feel like this actually needs to be, could be flipped. So that the access point is a little more private. That's something we discussed before. We can create sort of an opening in the wall that goes up with a stair. We can create an opening here or somewhere around here. Let's see. This isn't even, is this? Yeah, that's equal still. And again, this area here was to try and maintain some level of privacy coming in from the back door. So to remind myself, I'm going to put that door back here. We'll see how that lines up with the garage. Probably put a walking path and preserve most of the green space off to one side. And then here you can have sort of a sitting area. Here you can have a more like dining area. Here you can have a TV area with sort of a wall that separates it. just thinking, let's put this wall. I want to just kind of delineate this space completely. So let's give this a good dimension here, and we can create like a cased opening that just really makes this a private area. Something like 3 feet for the door swing, and another 5 feet is good for, 2 people to stand. So, I mean, maybe 7.5. Kind of plays off the width of this. You got this width and then that width being the same. I know it seems silly, but actually aligning. If you're standing here and you turn and you're talking to someone outside, when you walk in and close the door, you would turn and kind of have a similar space, so it's familiar. The proportions of the space before you enter. See, I've got cased opening. Question is just how big do we want this? What side do we want the door swing on? All of these things will kind of come into play. And again, I know it seems really silly, but actually placing down little pieces of furniture here and there, like throughout the design, helps you understand what the spaces are going to be used for. So I think I've got like a credenza entry table. Like a small council table that doesn't project out too far from the wall. Something for a smaller home like this would be appropriately sized. And then, I mean, it actually starts to get you think, like, is the space too big or is it too small? But you'll see if I do this already, I'll just center this on the space. It's just important to take the time to do these small little gestures. It starts to make you think, well, if I have this on this wall here, what is this other wall be used for? It kind of kills the space. For a bench, you wouldn't want a bench to be partial width. You would want a bench to be full width. So would we put a bench along this wall? And if we did do that, would it make sense for this door swing to be flipped, or just the entire configuration? And looking at it now, I think so. But let me just get a couple more pieces down here. I'm like already rotating it over here, like I know that's where it's gonna end up. Length. Seven foot 6. This. Flip over to here, which I guess actually makes a little more sense. Also with the closet, and it doesn't need to be centered there, but it does clear it. If that looks frustrating on plans, I mean, you can always represent that door swing as like not all the way open. We know it clears it, but the truth is like that door is going to be closed 98% of the time. Same thing with this door. But this would be awkward to walk in like into the bench, and so that's why I was saying we can just take this configuration and flip it. So let's do that. We'll have to find the center point of this configuration, assuming it was centered in the first place. It's not showing the trim on this. It's always frustrating. Let me see if I have an updated family. Windows. It would say window. You know what? Actually, this is an older one because it doesn't even have the option for the Montines. Oh, but it's a fix with trim. I don't know if I have that. Okay, well, let's see. Anyway, just edit this one. I want the trim to show up in plan view. So silly. That wouldn't be. It's already 3D, so this one also. Plan view. I mean, if you just update this now. Visible, yes, but let's just make a parameter that says the instance, you know, do you want it visible? You can turn it on or off if the window with trim. I mean, now I'm just thinking like this, you really only need one window like this. And Revit gives you a window with trim and without trim, and it's like you could have just made one window and made the trim optional. But anyway, we'll just call that trim. It'll inherently be visible. Same thing with the sash or the sill. Put that on the same trim file. Let's save as family. Windows. Okay. Yeah. What I'm going to do in the future is I've got a window that has like Montines on it, or like the grids, and so it'd be nice to just update this one completely. Overwrite the existing version, make it editable, sure. Okay. Trim, it's supposed to be shown. So why isn't it? Maybe it's cutting through it, and so sometimes when it's cut through, it doesn't show. When cut in plan. Okay. Same thing for this little guy. When cut in plan. Okay. Save. Load it back in. Okay. Overwrite the existing. You should see it populate. There it is. So that's great. And it kind of reveals like these like issues where aligning the trim gets like really difficult on these pieces because it gives you one dimension. I think does it give you different dimensions for the inside and outside? It does. Okay, but it's just a bit frustrating. This has got to be another 1/2 inch. Yeah. So the interior trim on this will be 3 inches, which it's not. That's not a. It's not a trim dimension. I mean, what's really going to be guiding this, again, thinking back to construction, is two 2x6s here, which are going to be 1.5, 3 inches, not 3.5 inches. So technically this should scooch over 1/2 inch. That would be a more realistic representation of it. And then if we edit this for the exterior trim to be 2 inches, that will update to be clean. So now we've got like a true detail there. And with that said, I know like the window I had above it was actually designed to meet the width of all of that plus the trim and everything. So that's where this gets really kind of funky. Some of these details just have to be like called out more specifically versus the model. Otherwise you'll spend all your time revising the parameters on all these little models, which is important to do just once in a while, but let's see if it actually if it differentiates the head width. No. So I made this, the height, an extra 1/2 inch. So it's gonna get me all the way to the top. And now we have a difference in like plane. So was there an option for that? Trim projection on the exterior, yeah. 3/4 inch apply, so we shouldn't get any like shadowing on there. It should be completely lined up in our plan view. Let's see if it is. Yes, it is. That's the sill below, which also should be, it's not the exact detail we need there. And then you can see like a bench like this, it's kind of conflicting with that 18-inch window and the depth of the bench. It's a little big anyway, so we do it at 18 inches, which is a little more traditional for a bench. Always save, sip of coffee. Whoops. This is an adaptable model. That extra 3 inches helps us out there. I mean, I would propose like a floating full with bench or built-in, but let's get back to just flipping this door. We found the center point of our wall-to-wall. Now we're looking for the conceptual center point of the width of the door. It's ridiculously like just off. Probably that amounts. We did have it centered. But now we will take this grouping, and the outer one was the grouping of the, we just move this whole thing, we'll call it a template for the outer to match the inner, that 1/2 inch. So it was centered and we just changed that 1/2 inch dimension, so that makes sense. And then now we can flip this guy, so our door swing will be swinging into the bench, which I think is okay. Let's just give it a try, see how we feel. Do not want to copy, flip it over the center line. There we go. Let's take a look. I'm just going to leave this guiding center line in place for now. Extra fine center line, override, graphic by element, halftone. I like to keep these center lines in place sort of throughout the project. And they help to tell the story. Maybe it would actually be centered on the door, but it helps tell the story of like sight lines and entering, exiting a space. Let's see how this was aligned here, and I'm feeling like that opening is maybe a little too big, exposes a little too much of the house too early on. Finish dressing this up with a big mirror on the wall. I don't know, 4 feet up, top of slab, no. And just make sure all these things are getting placed down properly. Got to flip this chair out of the way. That's why keeping that is important. So it's not bad. I mean, I'm liking, let's see how that looks on the exterior. Shouldn't have made like much of a difference, but it definitely helps bring people in more towards the center of the home. It makes this foyer feel pretty large. So this space is always going to be adaptable here. Like throughout this design process, I mean, 7'6". And this is a movable view here, so let's just walk on in. Wait to enter the home. Let's get a reasonable eye level here. Into the home, the door swings to the right. You come in, so you'd be like facing this way a little more. And then, so the question is, does this feel nice? I think it does. It's okay. Just again, this opening feels a little too revealing. And I'm kind of questioning if it would be nice. We have the daylight coming in from the door here, which is fine. What's going on there? This is going up to ceiling. Oh, we've got 5/8 of an inch base constraint. It's level 1. I gotta add the ceiling in there. That's what that little offset is there. So I'm looking around. I mean, I like that. It almost seems nice to have some more daylight coming into that little space there. I'm wondering if we can offset that and put a vertical floor to ceiling glass pane, or if that's even too invasive for that area. Maybe just some greenery would help liven it up. That might be good enough. Again, windows add cost, and so, you know, if we're thinking about this in terms of cost efficiency and design, we don't want to just go adding windows all the time. We want those moments to be special throughout the house. So look back at this in the floor plan here. Like I was mentioning, this just feels like way too big, but I do want, what is this anyways? It's 8 feet. Let's see if we can collapse this down to 6 feet. We have 72? No. And I don't know why, I'm just feeling like I want to just see what it feels like with a window in here, just because it is a small room. We're coming in from the entry. It's a public area, so meaning like a window from the exterior facing the neighbor's side, floor to ceiling. It shouldn't reveal too much private about the home. So let's just see what that feels like there. Even in front of the tree there. So again, which is why it's like it's important to think of these things from private to public. I mean, that it feels better. It's a little odd. I think it's too small. I'm just wondering if it can be a true floor to ceiling. So I had this labeled side light because it was like adjusting for the side light for the door height there. Right. But I don't want to go down a path where I'm forgetting that I changed this. And we should only have that one side light. I don't think I want to go any bigger for that side light. But maybe we will. So let's actually just keep this one as the 1.5 and then duplicate it, remove the side light designation, and then change it to its true height. Okay. And then, I mean, there's an issue here, I know now, with like the I would call it a door swing and your mirror location and all these sort of items. But it does feel better, and so I think, you know, these are just furniture pieces. This is just a mirror. It can always be changed to something different that fits the space, so I'm just going to do that. If people want a mirror there at all. .30 by 42. Round corners. Does that adjust? Yeah. Great. Let's lower it. It's like we can be very purposeful about this window trim just meeting right on the line, which is always very strange, or doing trimless windows, which would look more appropriate for the space as like a modern, but especially if it was floor to ceiling, make more sense. Which I'm just going to swap out right now so I don't forget. Fixed width trim, we're at 2484, but let's just do fixed. Okay, 24, wow, I don't even have it. 2496. Dark. I don't even know what that is. Let's check it out. While my materials are loading, I'm just going to take a quick look at something else here. Auto trim dark. Auto trim black. Okay. Height 8. Okay. So that is that 5/8 of an inch, and then I don't know, having that is all feeling very congested here. Probably having no plant or a small plant, and then if this can really align with be sleeker. I'm just gonna plop in our reflected ceiling. Let's see. Our ceiling. Sketch it in here. It's like, what's going on there? And again, drafting preferences, you can run around room to room, and that definitely helps with scheduling these types of things. For design purposes, I usually just start by just throwing down an entire ceiling plane and then breaking it up as we move along. So ceiling level 1, that's going to be up there. Just make sure everything's kind of looking right in our section. There it is now. It's coming up to that 8-foot mark. I was already thinking that I know I want to actually raise this, so let's just do that now. Sorry about that. One foot. We've got 9-foot ceilings on the first floor. I think that's enough. See if everything else raises up with it. The stair we're gonna have to redo. So now let's just confirm we're at 8 1/4, 8 foot 11 1/4 because we're up 3/4 of an inch for our floor plan there. That is top of slab, so what did I change? Leave this open. We're now blue. Close everything down. Start over here. This wall, I think I moved up. Yeah, no, this is the top of slab. And so remember, top of slab is where we want to be. Okay. Let's look at our 3D view. Where were we? So now this goes from being an 8-foot window to duplicate 9-foot window, so 12 on top of 108. And again, assessing these things like inside, outside. I like that it's just a slit there. Makes me think, you know, I would want to play off of that, those materials. It's further back than I thought it would be, which is a good thing. Actually, I was kind of concerned that it was going to be too far up front. But I like that, you know, it's not in this zone here. which I think would have felt like a little more of like a privacy invasion in terms of this line of view. Whoops, wrong plan. Try and draw on a line here. If it were back here, you know, you do get sight lines maybe in deeper into the house from the exterior, but something like this, especially with our cased opening being decreased, you know, you're not catching much beyond this public space that we've designated. So it's a good way to get natural light into there. I'm not like, this furniture is kind of strange. It doesn't really fit the modern vibe. But just as the concept, it looks good enough for now. Actually, I think I have like a standing mirror, which might look better for our renderings. Where is that mirror? Not like that. I know I've got a different mirror. Let me see if I can find it. Mirror, mirror, edgeless, this countertop, illuminated, full length, decor. That's what I wanted. Mount, magnifying. Okay, so let's check this one out. Upgrade the model. How old is this? It's old. That's what I wanted. I wanted something like that, but why does this not look like it was taken care of here? That is a mirror material. The exterior material is adaptable. It's leaning, so I thought about that, which is good. Just load it in. That would see if it's even worth dealing with. Copy these in case I want to throw them back in. This is getting in the nitty-gritty here. But there are things to think about, you know, when you're starting to render these up. I'm going to want to do like kind of a fly through. So I'm imagining, let's get this big screen. Imagining coming through this door. Okay, the door swings open. Turn to the side here, you're greeted with not that mirror. But maybe it just needs to be taller. Just keep that configuration for now, and then put like a small plant in the corner. We gotta move on. So some of these things have been like really helpful to have in the model just to like throw down, especially for quick renderings, and especially now like AI converted renderings, so that you don't have to like prompt some of these things in and waste your time doing that. Like you've got these models that are sort of ready to go, that when it's rendered by the AI, you know, it interpolates like what this pot should look like, and it's often very close to something you would have photoshopped in or modeled in separately. So like that, you can imagine how like AI is going to interpret that when you're doing some renderings there, but that's like nice enough. And again, we've got like the ceiling in now, so it's starting to feel like a finished space. From the interior, I know we can hide this line that's not going to really be there. So this feels like a great foyer. Like I think as a public entry to the house, it feels really good. Now opening up into this space, again, it feels still way too open. Probably put some artwork on the wall or some hooks on the wall there. I will do that very quickly because I know I'm going to forget to do something like that later. Just put that at the front so I stop clicking on that. Just override, halftone these. What do I call these? Hooks? I forgot what I called them. When I model these things, come up with these names and I forget. Let's just see if it was a hook, wall hook. There you go, perfect. Okay. 12-inch spacing feels pretty good. That's great. I think the 7'6" dimension is probably going to stay for the depth of that space. And look, I mean, we've been designing for this long, and maybe some people think that some of this stuff is trivial and not important, but I have found, like I mentioned before, like I design everything kind of bringing up simultaneously, and I would say like I'm sort of getting too into the weeds here, but just in terms of like the sequence of entering the home, how it feels. What happened there? That is not the center of this space. Oh, got an odd number of wall pegs. So actually this one will be centered another 6 inches over. But, you know, some other people might say that they appreciate... Ooh, that's way too low. The level of thought given to this. So those are up 5 feet. I mean, we got taller ceilings, we have to remember. It'll be nice to have sort of a chandelier hanging in this space. We don't want the wall pegs like hitting people on the back of the head, but it should be... whatever someone is going to do in here. You might do some built-ins here just to give an idea, but again, we're just trying to keep the perception of the space low cost. These are all finishes that are achievable, and it's the architecture of the space that's really providing like the high level of design, like this sort of window, floor to ceiling window in the corner there. And so moving through the space, there's nothing here. Oh, I've got that, which is funny. This window, I know it's got to change sizes. Okay, I've got that space like pretty well configured, and I think if I were moving through the space, and then if you were coming to a party or not, it might make sense to move into formal space and have the private space like off to one side, and so that's sort of breaking the symmetry of the private versus public on that side. But that's okay. I'm just going to copy this wall with the opening over. I feel like there needs to be some next level of space that we move through here. And obviously that's feeling pretty small, but it might be that you move through a formal sitting area or a library before you get to like this back portion of the house. And if that's 7'6" in front, which is generous, probably want a similar dimension back here. And I'm growing fond of cased openings being used to delineate spaces, and like really eliminating hallways if possible, because again, like these are a smaller home that could be like, this is a huge island. I don't think it's gonna end up being that big. It would be nice actually if we either shift everything back, rotate it. Obviously that doesn't fit, but a smaller island, like, or even a peninsula off of the corner there, private TV area here, got to squeeze a powder room in the stair. So we'll see how this continues to shape up. Let's put our stair in the back end. Stair. Always save. Good. So we were going like, it'll actually be mounted on the slab, but again, there's no way to compensate in this stair for like the extra 3/4 of an inch for the flooring that's gonna go in there. So you're always kind of compensating for the lack of precision in some of these modeling things for the real world built environment. But we're gonna go finish floor up to level 2. And now it's got us at 16 treads, which is fine. Let's see if we can still pursue this straight run stair. Make sure that it's 3 feet wide. And like where that would feel good. For some reason I keep thinking that it's going to feel better to have a stair starting from here. This center point, I thought I was going to have some like architectural feature that might bump in or out in this area, but so it's not a true, like, I should just eliminate this actually. I don't want it to guide me in terms of spatial perception. Accessing the stair from the mudroom would be, I think it can get messy in the mudroom. So I think it would be nice to pull that more out into the public space. Don't know why, I'm just trying to align this, see how this feels in terms of needing to come in 2 spaces feels way too forced to have to like walk through this space. It does feel like very traditional in terms of a parlor, where if you were having a meeting for whatever reason in your home, someone can come in and they have this like still public, semi-private space. You're not in the foyer area, but you're in a library area or a parlor space. But somehow that's just feeling too forced. I'm not sure if people are going to appreciate that. So, sorry for the moment of repose. I'm just taking a long look at this. For some reason, I still do like the stair kind of coming back, and maybe there's a powder room back here in this area that comes off of. I should get this thing like appropriately sized to edit this group. I think we're gonna have the luxury of having, what is this, 4 foot wide? Like a 3 foot for now. And then it's probably way too long. I think this is like 10 feet, 9, yeah, 10. That's a full slab. We can shave off. Two feet. And it would still be considered a large island by any standard, but I'm just going to delete out these cabinets for now. We'll figure out that configuration later. Because I would still want probably the sink to be symmetrical. I don't know, we'll see. I don't know, I'm gonna lose at least one set of seats here. That doesn't need to be perfect. Okay, so now I'm playing at least with something that's a little more realistic in terms of size for this space. And I don't know if the sink is going to be in the island or not, but let's just lay down some conceptual things here. I like to go 30 inches on the cabinet depth, and we'll see if we have the space to do that or not in this. Depending on what this is. New standard is like no less than 3'6" for that, but we do have the 30-inch countertop, so that kind of compensates for where a refrigerator would be jetting out from. And so this still feels good as long as we have like 3.5 to 4 feet here, 3'9". That's appropriate. I mean, it can float throughout the space there. I do not like proposing L-shaped kitchens, and so probably will not see that from me here. People tend to like the kitchen back at the back of the house here, and just for fun, I'm just gonna take this floor-to-ceiling window that we had here and put it over here, so start to imagine little more daylight getting into the space. I mean, this doesn't feel so bad, just like as a first impression in terms of the breakup of the space. These, like I was mentioning, these cased openings really help to create a little bit of separation. I know you can see into what is considered the private part of the home from here, but you feel like there's these barriers that you would have to cross in order to get there. And so from like a psychology standpoint, the question would be like, does it still make sense to force people to have to walk through here, some daylight, a library space, a lounge area, even for the people living in the home, to have a space that you can kind of escape to that feels like it's outside of your private home, like that third space place. Feel nice. And then you do walk into the more private part of the home, and don't critique this at all because it's not anywhere near, but you can have a stair that overlooks this like public area here. So when you come down in the morning, from sleeping, you're greeted immediately with the kitchen. Usually that's pretty prevalent in your morning routine, so that makes sense. The other item, or adjacency, I should say, so this, it wouldn't be open underneath and everything like that. I'm just kind of twirling around for fun. The other adjacency I'm going to want to consider is the bathroom and some additional storage. And so what I'm trying to say is the powder room down on the first floor, I think would be a nice, or where I would want it to be located, is not accessible from inside the mudroom, although a second door in there might be interesting. But definitely close to it, so that when you are leaving the home, and I'm just going to throw some things in here just to get a sense of space. When you are leaving the home, we can put a window in there, even if it's frosted. That would be nice. Kind of making this vertical window the typology of the home here. Why not? We'll just have one there too. Should see if that's going to align with some plumbing upstairs. When you're leaving the home, you can just come in, use the restroom. Having it right off the kitchen like that, it doesn't feel great. So I'm wondering if some of these items could be flipped in a way. And then again, maybe the straight run stair isn't the appropriate item. I don't know. But let's place this. We got a toilet. On the finished floor level here. It's going to be one way or the other. I don't know why I was just envisioning it like this first. So that if we're coming in, we'll grab our 30-inch door, which is going to be standard throughout the space. They can upgrade the height of it if they want, but 6'8" is fine. That's way too deep for a powder room. That's big enough. What's the depth here? So per code, you need 21 inches in front of the leading edge of your toilet. So I always do something like that, but then trace it back to where are we? So 5 feet is always seems And we're starting to just develop these sort of, we got our 7'6" dimension, which I know like a bench in there can feel good with some space, with some daylight coming in, with a table and some key drop-off area. Possibly even like a closed storage area, which, let's see. You can maybe do a closet here for some of the off-season stuff and move this inward. You don't need daylight in the bathroom, and I was already saying that this would be a frosted glass panel. So you kind of have to assess the value of some of these things. Someone gonna appreciate daylight in the powder room? We don't know. So we got 5 feet, which is a healthy dimension for the powder room. Depth, width, however you wanna look at it. Toilet will be 18 inches off the sidewall. Let's get a vanity in here. Flat single door, flat double door. I think this is my vanity piece. Let's double check in 3D here. What do we got? What is this? Mirror, we don't need anymore. Sure, update it. Take the handles off. It's a floating vanity there. That's fine. Oh, should save. Vanity depth looks way too deep. It's usually no more than 21 inches. Width, we have this 36. That's fine. The height we'll keep up at typical. I'll end up pulling that off the wall. What is our width here? 7'1", very large. Even a 3-foot vanity is sort of big for a room like that. And then so if you're doing 3 and 3, it shouldn't need to be any bigger than 6 feet, this room. What was it doing? Oh, 7'1", so we would be 1'1". 3 feet, so that gets you that extra, or not extra, but 18 inches from the toilet off to that edge. And so maybe it doesn't need to be floating, or if it is, you could pull it off the wall and provide a smaller vanity. This hosted on the finished floor. So countertop we'll throw on top of that. Countertop adjustable. Not sure which one is which here. Yes, bathroom sink. Bathroom sink round. 21, 22 inches deep. Finished floor. Okay, so if you're still tuned in, or if you're watching this post-production, you're getting a massive cross-section of various design thoughts, and still not convinced that everything is lined up the way it needs to be. Meaning, some of this stuff could flip to the other side of the house, and it might make more sense for, this entry sequence to proceed through with some of these built walls here. That's what I'm seeing, like right off the bat. But then if that were the case, we could end up flipping the entire house so that this doorway and entry is actually on this side of the house, and the slope of the roof is different. There is a large tree in the yard that we're trying to preserve here, and so I think as part of the green space it would still make sense for like these doors to align. So in my mind, that's what would be getting explored in terms of options for the exterior. Is this thing just being mirrored on the exterior? And I'm trying to see if there would be any advantage of that to that. We've got all the stuff we have to fix. Let's do now. Edit this footprint. I'll just change my offset to 10 feet. Scooch that in. Same thing with this guy. 10 feet in. Let's see. Are you gonna play nice? 10 feet in. Part of it did. Okay, so what I was saying was maybe I'll throw the trees on. Site trees, not visible, visible, show, hide, not hide, show. Okay. Let's get my site plan. This tree, let's see, I know I've got a tree that I can use. It's a little more detail oriented than the standard trees that come. Tree black, locust. Eastern redbud, honey locust is this one. Let's use this. That's tiny. Have a slab. We'll do grade. Place it down. Let's see if we can enlarge this height to 6 feet. Yeah, try like 70 or 80 feet. Seems like a decent compromise. And I still am going to put this on the tree layer. It's one thing to represent it in plan, and actually that's a really good model. It has like various versions of itself for more or less detailed views, of course. But I think that's like a decent representation. So what I was saying is, if it makes sense for the roof line to be one way or the other based on this tree location, and again, it might seem silly to even consider some of these things in terms of design, but they all play a factor. We are facing south at the front of the building, so you can do some sun and shadow studies to even just see Might be things that you're not imagining, but if I place like a table and chair set down here, and people are more likely to gather in the evening than the early hours, just internally in terms of like a family meeting or a extended family or friend group. Morning is nice to go out on your own on the weekends, have a cup of coffee. But the reason I'm saying that is if it makes sense for the lower part of the roof that would not disturb the sunlight either during the morning or afternoon, or intentionally providing more shade, like let's say at an hour like this on the back half. If this part were lowered here, we could actually do that really quick. Edit. Let's take this roof line and say that you do not define it. No. And this one, yes. Define slope of the 212. That'll instantly change, at least in the summer months, your perception of the space back there, and maybe how much sun is getting back there. And I'll do some of those studies offline here, but that actually feels better already. Just thinking that I probably would want more daylight in the evening hours coming into this area, even if it was a harsh or a low sun coming in at that angle or somewhere around there, just to have more daylight coming into the backyard, having the option to put an umbrella or a trellis or something, having that option or not is more beneficial, I think, in terms of like the architectural layout. So it's probably what I'm gonna end up doing is flipping at least this configuration. So again, this is why I cautioned against proceeding too far forward with any one element. I think like I brought that up to a level of development, but it's not so far along that I can't easily mirror these things over the grid line B and just kind of continue on. But if I had laid out the entire kitchen, let's say, and I was working in some adjacency with some area, it could be a lot more work to have to rework that. So I'm going to pause here for now. Not sure if my camera's still working or not. Let's see if I can get it up. There we go. Sorry about that. Not sure how long the camera was offline for. But I'm gonna wrap it up here because this is getting kind of long here. We made a little bit of progress on the interior. I'll maybe tune in again for a second half of the day today, just to show some progress, but I'm gonna make some moves offline, I think, to flip that, study the floor plan a little bit more in terms of aligning the stair with the second level, so that the second level usually comes together a lot quicker than the first floor, just because once you have a good idea of the corridor and the stair, the bedrooms, the closets, the primary bedroom and the ensuite, even the storage closet, utility closet, things like this, they just start to fall in place a lot easier with like a central double-loaded corridor for a second floor. So with that said, if you tuned in, thank you. If you are watching this post-production, thank you. Leave some comments or try and reach out. More than happy to be a mentor, share some of these thoughts more directly with anyone that has questions or wants to understand what this process is like. Yeah, that's all I got for now. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.